What was the craziest scandal at your school? I was on my way to math class when my friend ran up to me and said, "Dude, I just saw your mom march into the office and slap Principal Martin in the face. What happened?" I dropped my textbook and sprinted down the hallway toward the main office, where a crowd was already gathering, and I could hear my mother screaming while Principal Martin was shouting back that she'd assaulted him and he was calling the police. When I pushed through the crowd, I saw my mother standing there, with her face bright red and her hands shaking while Principal Martin held a tissue to his bloody nose, and the secretary was on the phone calling for security. "Mom, what are you doing?" I asked, mortified as everyone had their phones out recording. "Your principal put hidden cameras in the girls' locker rooms," my mother announced loud enough for everyone to hear, and the entire crowd went silent. My embarrassment turned to horror. Principal Martin had been at every school event since I was a freshman, giving speeches about integrity and safety. His face went from angry to panicked. "That's a completely baseless accusation," he said. "My daughter's friend Sophia found one yesterday when she was changing for volleyball practice," my mother retorted, pulling out her phone. I felt sick because Sophia was my girlfriend. It was hidden behind the air vent, and when she told her parents, they called me because I work in IT and traced where the feed was going. "That's impossible," Principal Martin said, sweat forming on his forehead. "Our school doesn't have cameras in private areas." "These weren't school cameras," my mother said, showing her phone screen to the growing crowd of students and teachers. "These were tiny wireless cameras that connected to a private server, and guess whose office computer was the only device with access to that server?" The secretary stepped away from Principal Martin like he was radioactive, while teachers started backing toward the door. "Someone must have hacked my computer," Principal Martin said quickly. "I would never do something like that. I've been an educator for 20 years. When I accessed your server, I found your Amazon account still logged in with the purchase history showing you bought 12 micro cameras 6 months ago," my mother said, scrolling through her phone. 6 months meant he'd been watching students all school year, and my skin crawled thinking about every girl who changed for gym class having no idea they were being recorded. "You hacked into my computer?" Principal Martin shouted. "That's illegal! What's illegal is recording minors changing clothes," my mother shot back, and several teachers started shouting while trying to get students out of the office. The vice principal pushed through the crowd looking horrified. "Tell me this isn't true," she said. "I was just trying to monitor for vandalism and drug use," Principal Martin said, his voice cracking. "In the girls' locker room?" the vice principal asked. "By hiding cameras behind vents?" "I was trying to protect the students," Principal Martin said desperately. "You were watching children undress," my mother said, her voice deadly calm now. "And I know the real reason you placed those cameras." Everyone went quiet again, and I felt my legs go weak, because if secretly recording kids changing wasn't the reason, what could possibly be worse? "I traced the server to see who else had been accessing the feeds," my mother said, and Principal Martin's face went completely white. "You weren't just watching them yourself." "Mom, what are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "He's been selling access to the live streams," my mother said, holding up her phone showing chat logs. $50 a month for basic access, $200 for premium with recording capabilities, and these subscribers have usernames from all over the world. I threw up into the trash can by the secretary's desk, because the thought of strangers watching my girlfriend and classmates changing made me physically sick, and several other students were crying. The crowd erupted in chaos, and students started screaming while teachers tried to maintain order, but security guards had arrived and were trying to clear the office. "That's not true!" Principal Martin shouted, pure panic in his voice. "Someone else must have done this using my computer. Your PayPal account linked to the server has received over $30,000 in the last 6 months, my mother said, all from anonymous payments that match the subscription dates. $30,000 from selling videos of kids at my school, and I wanted to punch him myself, but I was shaking too hard. "You've been selling videos of our children?" the vice principal asked, looking like she was going to be sick. "How many perverts have been watching us?" A girl from my PE class screamed. "The police are already downloading everything from the server," my mother said. "There's one more thing," my mother added. She turned around to look at our gym teacher who was standing in the doorway, his face lighting up like a Christmas tree. "I've been waiting for this," he said, as he started approaching Principal Martin, before doing something none of us expected. He grabbed Principal Martin by the collar with both hands and slammed him hard against the wall next to the trophy case. The whole case shook, and several trophies fell over while everyone in the office gasped and backed away. "You knew!" the gym teacher shouted right in Martin's face. "Female staff kept telling me about weird stuff near the locker rooms, and you told me to ignore it." Martin tried to push him off, but the gym teacher was way stronger and kept him pinned against the wall. His grip was so tight that Martin's shirt collar was cutting into his neck, and his face was turning red. "You told me to keep quiet about the maintenance request for those vents," the gym teacher yelled even louder. Martin's face went from red to white in about 2 seconds, and he stopped struggling. Security guards rushed in and grabbed the gym teacher's arms, trying to pull him away from Martin. It took 3 guards to finally break his grip and drag him back while Martin slumped against the wall, gasping for air. The vice principal was shouting for everyone to calm down, but nobody was listening because students were screaming and pushing to see what was happening. More teachers arrived and started herding students out into the hallway, but everyone had their phones up recording everything. The The gym teacher was still trying to get at Martin even with 3 guards holding him back. Police sirens suddenly filled the air and my stomach dropped even more than it already had. 2 police cars pulled up right in front of the school, and officers jumped out running toward the building. They pushed through the crowd of students and entered the office with their hands on their weapons. One officer went straight to Martin, while another helped the guards control the gym teacher. More police cars arrived, and soon there were at least 6 officers in the office area. They started separating everyone and telling students to move back, while 2 officers headed toward Martin's office. One officer put yellow tape across Martin's office door, and another stood guard making sure nobody went near it. Detective Eric Gomez walked in wearing a suit and badge, and immediately took control of the situation. He pointed at groups of students and told them to leave the building right away. Teachers started moving everyone toward the exits while he approached my mother. "Ma'am, I need you to stay and show me everything you found," he said calmly. He turned to Martin, who was still against the wall looking sick. 2 officers approached Martin, and one started reading him his rights while students pressed against the windows to watch. "You have the right to remain silent," the officer said while pulling out handcuffs. Martin's hands were shaking, so bad the officer had trouble getting the cuffs on him. The crowd outside was getting bigger as more students came to see what was happening. I pulled out my phone and texted Sophia that the police were here and Martin had been arrested. She didn't text back, and I kept checking my phone every few seconds, hoping she would respond. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely type, and I felt like I might throw up again. The officer started walking Martin out of the office toward the police car. Hundreds of students had their phones out recording as he did the walk of shame past everyone. Some kids were crying and others were shouting angry things at him as he passed. They put him in the back of the police car, and I watched his head drop forward like he was trying to hide. Detective Gomez came over to me and my mom and asked us to come to the station. "We need formal statements from both of you," he said. Mom nodded, and we followed him to his unmarked car while other officers stayed to secure the scene. During the drive, Mom finally started explaining what had been happening for the past 2 weeks. She told me Sophia's parents had called her right after Sophia found the camera behind the vent. They knew Mom worked in IT and asked if she could trace where the camera feed was going. Mom spent days tracking the signal and following digital trails to find the server. She discovered it was hidden on the school network, but only accessible from Martin's computer. She found his Amazon purchase history still logged in, showing the camera purchases from 6 months ago. She also found the payment system he set up for selling access to the live streams. The whole time she was gathering evidence she couldn't tell anyone except the police. She had been working with detectives for a week, helping them build the case. They wanted to make sure they had everything documented before arresting him, so he couldn't destroy evidence. We arrived at the police station, and Detective Gomez led us inside to an interview room. He told us Sophia and her parents were in another room giving their statements right then. I wanted to see her, but he said we had to stay separated during the investigation. He explained that because the videos had been sold to people in other states and countries, it was now federal. The FBI Cybercrimes Unit was already involved and agents were on their way to help. He asked me questions about Martin and if I'd ever noticed anything strange about him. I told him about how Martin was always at every school event taking pictures. He wrote everything down and asked if any other students had mentioned weird experiences. While we were talking, we heard shouting from the hallway outside the interview room. Tyler Rodriguez was crying and yelling while his parents tried to calm him down. "Ashlyn was changing in there every day," Tyler screamed through his tears. His sister Ashlyn was a sophomore on the swim team who used the locker room constantly. Tyler's dad was bright red and looked ready to kill someone as he paced the hallway. His mom was crying and holding Tyler while trying to keep his dad from doing something stupid. 2 officers had to physically block his dad from going toward the holding cells where Martin was. Detective Gomez excused himself to help calm the situation while we waited in the interview room. When he came back, he told us more families were arriving as word spread about the arrests. He said the FBI had already started tracing the IP addresses of everyone who bought access. Mom pulled out her laptop and showed him the documentation she had gathered over 2 weeks. She had screenshots of chat logs and payment records and IP addresses from over 30 countries. The detective's eyes got wide as he scrolled through page after page of evidence. He called in another detective, and they both started going through everything Mom had collected. They said this was one of the biggest cases of this type they'd ever seen. Mom hadn't slept in 48 hours, but refused to rest until every bit of data was preserved. Later that night, our house became like a command center with forensics people everywhere. They set up computers in our living room, and Mom worked with them, organizing all the evidence. FBI agents arrived and started copying everything from Mom's laptop to their secure servers. They worked through the night, making sure nothing would be lost or corrupted. Mom showed them back doors into Martin's server that he didn't even know existed. She had found ways to recover deleted files and chat logs he thought were gone forever. The agents kept saying how lucky they were that Mom had found everything before Martin could destroy it. The next morning, I barely slept and got to the school early to find the parking lot packed with police cars and news vans. The superintendent stood at the front entrance, directing everyone to the auditorium for an emergency assembly, while security guards checked student IDs at every door. I found a seat in the back as hundreds of students filed in, looking confused and scared. The superintendent took the microphone and told everyone that Principal Martin had been arrested for placing hidden cameras in the girls' locker rooms and selling access to the footage online. Half the auditorium started crying, and several girls ran out through the side doors with their hands over their faces. She promised the district would cooperate fully with law enforcement and bring in extra counselors to help students process what happened. April Stevens, our school counselor, was already setting up a crisis support center in the library with folding tables and boxes of tissues. Within an hour, the line of students waiting to talk stretched down the hallway and around the corner. They had to call in counselors from 3 other schools just to handle everyone who needed help. I walked past the library and saw kids sitting in circles crying while counselors handed out water bottles and tried to keep everyone calm. Outside the main entrance, Chuck Hodges from Channel 7 News had set up his